Tonight, damage control.
I'm concerned that it happened, but there's nothing contemporaneous that I'm aware of that is of great consequence.
The Pentagon leak suspect under arrest and the risk to national security.
Plus, Florida's ban on abortion.
And free speech under attack.
That is profoundly wrong. It's un-American. It's also contrary to the principles of the free market.
The threat to one of the first guarantees prescribed by the Founding Fathers. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Compromised security and relations with foreign allies now in question in the wake of leaked Pentagon documents. Welcome to Faith Nation from our News Bureau in Washington. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening, I'm Jenna Browder. The suspect, wanted for leaking highly classified military documents from the Pentagon, made his first court appearance today. The DOJ announced the arrest of the 21-year-old IT specialist after he allegedly punched damaging holes in U.S. national security.
The breach raising questions and concerns about the Pentagon's safeguards of sensitive information and even relations with key international allies. CBN's Brody Carter has more in our top story.
With guns drawn, a tactical SWAT team with military gear surprised the village of North Dayton, Massachusetts, surrounding the 21-year-old suspect, Jack Teixeira, at his parents' home. Teixeira was ordered to walk backwards with his hands on his head towards an armored vehicle before being taken into custody.
Today, the Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira in connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information.
The young suspect allegedly responsible for putting America's security at risk was a low-ranking enlisted airman. His record says he served at Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts and worked as a cyber transport systems journeyman or an IT specialist. It's been less than a week since the far-reaching leak sent the Pentagon and FBI into damage control. An estimated hundreds of spilled documents revealed the U.S. spying on allies and adversaries alike, and the disclosure of sensitive military intelligence about the war in Ukraine.
All indications are, again, this is a criminal act, a willful violation of those, and again, another reason why we're continuing to investigate and support DOJ's investigation.
The classified leak originated in the online discussion and gaming forum called Discord. One participant told the Associated Press that Teixeira was an observant Christian who spoke of God and prayed with members of the group. And before Teixeira's arrest, the Washington Post talked to one of those teens who was a member of that chat room. He described the leaker as a charismatic, gun-loving gamer. He apparently shared the intel to impress the people in the small group.
It felt like I was on top of Mount Everest. It felt like I was above everyone else to some degree, and that I would be able to brag to some people that I knew stuff that they didn't.
And he explained how the information got progressively more revealing.
The documents were often listed as Ukraine versus Russia at first. However, it slowly spiraled into just intelligence about everything.
Even though the documents have reportedly been online for some time, U.S. intelligence apparently didn't know about them until they were reported by the media. President Biden downplayed the leak during his visit to Ireland.
I'm concerned that it happened, but there's nothing contemporaneous that I'm aware of that is of great consequence.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. Well, Teixeira appeared in federal court this morning. Joining us now with the latest details from his arraignment is national security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Caitlin, what are the specific charges he faces?
John, the 21-year-old faces charges under the Espionage Act. Those include unauthorized retention and transmission of national defense information and unauthorized removal of classified information and defense materials. Teixeira did not enter a plea during today's arraignment. His detention hearing has now been scheduled for next Wednesday, and he'll remain in custody until then. He faces up to 15 years in jail if he's convicted of both violations. Speaking after Teixeira's court appearance today, Attorney General Merrick Garland stressed the national security implications of this leak and said his office intends to send a message about how important it is to protect this kind of classified material.
You know, Caitlin, it's stunning that such a junior member of the military was able to get this kind of sensitive information.
Right, Jenna. Ultimately, the Pentagon is still investigating that, but according to a defense official, Teixeira was assigned to the 102nd Intelligence Wing, which has a mission of packaging intelligence from various sources for senior military leaders around the world. Now, Teixeira's job was to work on the network where all that intelligence lives, so basically to keep it running. Prosecutors revealed today he does have a top security clearance, which he's had since 2021, and he had to go through a pretty rigorous background check to get it.
So, Caitlin, any idea on why he would leak these documents?
That part of the investigation is ongoing. We know his home was searched overnight for evidence, but we haven't heard anything else official. According to members of his chat group on the gaming platform Discord, where he initially shared the intelligence, he was just trying to impress his friends. John, Jenna?
All right, Caitlin Burke, thank you very much. Well, in other news tonight, Florida's ban on abortion after 6 weeks is set to make the Sunshine State one of the most restrictive in the country in terms of access to abortion. Late last night, Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill banning abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. It's called the Heartbeat Bill. The law bans abortions after the moment of gestational heartbeat can be detected in the womb. Opponents argue that time frame comes before many women know they're pregnant. The 6-week ban would not go into effect until after the Florida Supreme Court overturns its previous precedent on abortion.
And here with us now is Dr. Arlene Herrero-Shostak with the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. She practices family medicine in Florida. Eileen, welcome. So can you tell us the main points of this bill as supporters of abortion and abortion providers argue that this causes women harm? Your response?
Well, I would say that the total opposite is true. This bill is protecting, obviously, the life of unborn babies from as early as 6 weeks when a heartbeat is first detected. And obviously, women's lives are going to be safe and protected through this bill.
Yeah. It's called the Heartbeat Bill, and at 6 weeks, there's a gestational heartbeat can be detected. Talk to us about the medical science of a gestational heartbeat.
So the heart is the first organ that is formed in an unborn baby, and at 6 weeks gestation, there is clear scientific evidence that the heart is fully formed and that there is a viable heartbeat. The baby actually has as much as a 90% chance of surviving once a heartbeat is detected. We use ultrasound technology to detect these heartbeats. Unlike what the opposite side says, this is not electrical activity. That is not what an ultrasound detects. It is movement. So we know that this is indeed a beating heart of an unborn baby.
According to a new poll by the SBA Pro-Life America, Florida's abortion ban has the support of some 62% of Floridians and 76% of Hispanics. As I mentioned earlier, you practice in Florida. Is that the sense that you see? And if so, that seems pretty significant.
It is, and it just makes me excited and proud to be a Floridian and to be also Hispanic, which Hispanics have an even greater percent of approval of this bill, up to 75%. I just think it reflects our sense of how we value life, how we understand that an unborn baby is alive from gestation forward, and that we don't get lost in the words and the terminology, and we don't try to confuse. We see the heartbeat, it is a baby and it is alive, and I believe that up to 62% of Floridians support it, and up to 75% of Hispanics support it as well.
Yeah, you recently wrote an op-ed in the Miami Herald about alternatives to abortion in Florida. Tell us about that.
Well, we just want to make sure that our audience understands all the resources that are available to women that find themselves in the midst of an unwanted or unplanned pregnancy. There are so many resources available through crisis pregnancy centers, or they also call them pregnancy resource centers. And all of these resources have actually increased now with this heartbeat bill, effective immediately. There used to be $5 million allocated a year. Now it's $25 million. So this is good news, and this is such a relief and hope for women facing an unplanned pregnancy. They have choices through, again, these centers to find all kinds of help, everything from medical services, financial services, counseling, parenting classes, help with their bills, with their utilities, even job training for the future so that they are enabled and empowered to thrive in the future.
Yeah. Dr. Eileen Herrera-Shostak with Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Great to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up, the former president's nearly 8-hour deposition and more on Faith Nation.
And welcome back. More details about former President Trump's legal worries. He answered nearly 8 hours of questions returning to New York City for a deposition in a $250 million lawsuit over allegations of business fraud. The civil case, brought on by New York State Attorney General Letitia James, is slated to go to trial in October and alleges the former president inflated his personal net worth to secure better business loan agreements. Thursday's deposition follows Mr. Trump's not guilty plea last week in a criminal case involving 34 felony counts of falsifying business records.
And joining us now is Julia Manchester, national politics reporter for The Hill. Julia, great to have you with us this Friday evening. So on his Truth Social platform, Trump called this civil suit, quote, ridiculous, just like all of the other election interference cases being brought against me. Julia, is this a case, another case that could feed the Trump narrative that he's being unjustly persecuted?
I think President Trump is definitely going to present it that way, and he's going to use it to galvanize his base. And, you know, this deposition comes a week after he was obviously arraigned and arrested in New York City in that case with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. And, you know, that case in particular has gotten a lot of criticism, I think, on both sides of the aisle, even from Trump critics saying it's a weak case and such, and that, you know, Trump could end up benefiting from this. So I think you're going to see him very much push that along, push that narrative along, that this is proof that he is being targeted by the political and legal establishment in the United States.
Speaking of President Trump, Julia, he's just one of a number of possible 2024 contenders to address the NRA convention in Indianapolis this weekend. Among the others, former Vice President Mike Pence from Indiana, Nikki Haley, and then Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida, who has yet to formally announce his bid. He's also set to deliver a speech by video. Officially or not, is the 2024 primary well underway?
You know, I think it unofficially is. It's funny that you say that because Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina announced this week that he was launching a presidential exploratory committee. Now, that announcement was so funny because he, you know, released this campaign-style video that was essentially said, well, this is why I'm thinking about running for president. And then in an interview with CBS News, when asked whether he would support President Trump if he were the nominee, you saw Senator Scott say, well, I'm going to be the nominee. So I think it's definitely unofficially underway. I think right now you're seeing a lot of these Republican contenders kind of look at the political landscape because it's been a very volatile few weeks for Republicans in particular. You've seen Republicans have, poor performances in states like Wisconsin on the issue of abortion. And then you've seen, for example, the Supreme Court ruling on abortion. You've seen in Florida, Ron DeSantis signing that 6-week ban. So there's a concern, I think, as to whether they will get pushback surrounding that, how they should surround. And then, of course, you have President Trump's legal issues that are, taking the headlines. So I think they're trying to take a step back and see how this all develops and try to find that good segue into announcing their presidential ambitions.
Meanwhile, President Biden heading home tonight after a trip to Ireland. Trump criticizing the trip, saying, quote, the world is exploding around us. You could end up in a third world war, and this guy is going to be in Ireland. Julia, did Biden make any political gains on this trip?
Look, I think the trip to Ireland, I think Biden supporters would say it was good because we obviously do a lot of trade with the European Union and the UK. And this was a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Peace Accords. A lot of that has to play into the trading deal with Northern Ireland and how it factors into that border with the Republic of Ireland, which is in the EU. So the Biden administration would say this is essential for U.S. policy with that part of the world. But he went to Ireland at a time when, we saw a lot happening here in the United States, particularly that intelligence leak. And we saw President Biden address that. So, I think his critics are going to criticize the visit. His supporters are going to point out the good parts of it. I think it depends who you talk to on that one.
All right, Julia Manchester with The Hill. We always appreciate your insights. Thanks and have a great weekend, Julia.
Great to see you, Julia.
Thanks.
And when we come back, an ongoing threat to free speech, why the founders' principle protections could be at risk. Tonight, a major South Florida airport is reopening after historic rainfall totals brought devastating floods to the region. Hundreds of flights were canceled after the Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport was shut down Wednesday and Thursday. The National Weather Service declared a flash flood emergency after life-threatening storms and flooding brought nearly a foot of rain in a matter of hours to Fort Lauderdale and surrounding areas of South Florida.
Well, whether it's book bans or shouting down opponents in both a public square or on social media, it seems we're seeing the realities of cancel culture nearly at every turn.
So true. Too many. Free speech is under attack in our country. And along with it, the American way of life. Jennifer Wishon reports on this rising threat to democracy.
In America, even the most vile speech is protected. It's one of the first guarantees the founders bestowed upon American citizens in the Bill of Rights. Today, however, through censorship, banning books, and the new art of heckling speakers into silence, free speech is under attack like never before. So
what is going on here? I mean, what is the fear of having different ideas out there?
If you can deny citizens the opportunity to hear the truth, to challenge falsehood and lies, you can imprison people, not physically necessarily, but in a prison of lies and falsehoods. And that's one of the most profound forms of unfreedom that any human can experience, is living a life of lies.
As Senior Vice President of Alliance Defending Freedom, Ryan Bangert has a front row seat to the anti-free speech movement. He says it's speeding up and spreading to other sectors of the economy, like banking.
Take, for instance, my own organization, Alliance Defending Freedom. Fidelity Charitable made it more difficult for donors to give to ADF through their DAF accounts, simply because we are a religious freedom organization.
There are calls from both sides of the aisle to ban certain books many people find offensive, a practice some liken to the burning of books in Nazi Germany. Others celebrate efforts by social media companies to censor hateful speech, silence so-called misinformation, and ban people's accounts. The problem is everyone's threshold of what's hateful or dangerous is different, and sometimes misinformation turns out to be true. This spring, the president of West Texas A&M University canceled a student-organized drag show citing his religious beliefs, calling such shows derisive, divisive, and demoralizing misogyny. And even if you agree, critics warn a university president's personal beliefs can't be the standard. If that's the case, then student-led prayer could be next. Some calls for censorship and stifling of speech come from the very institutions designed to protect them. Take a bill passed by the House designed to prevent domestic terrorism after a shooting at a supermarket in New York. Critics argue the legislation could enable the Justice Department to target parents who disagree with their school boards. Jonathan Turley, law professor at the George Washington School of Law and constitutional scholar, testified against the bill.
Fortunately, even though we live in dangerous times, we have a Constitution designed for bad times, not good times. Indeed, the Constitution was written in the worst of times.
He points out similar laws already exist in Europe. Turley points to England, where he writes even a silent prayer is a criminal offense when done near an abortion clinic. and points to a European man recently convicted of a thought crime. The neo-Nazi was given a 4-year sentence for what the court called his toxic ideology, based on the contents of the home he shared with his mother, and continues, while most of us find Brock's views repellent and hateful, they were confined to his head and his room. At the World Economic Forum in January, the vice president of the European Commission predicted European hate speech laws will soon be the law of the land in the U.S.
Because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the U.S., I think that we have a strong reason why we have this in the criminal law.
Some scholars warn Americans can't assume the Constitution is indestructible.
Persons of certain faiths or beliefs, increasingly Christians, but also those of other faiths, are being frozen out of the marketplace simply because of the ideas they hold. And that is profoundly wrong. It's un-American. It's also contrary to the principles of the free market.
Even the founders disagreed at times over how the First Amendment should be applied. And while different opinions will persist, many people say it's important to preserve this freedom deemed central to being American. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thank you, Jennifer. Coming up, in the wake of tragedy and suffering, a sign of hope and a biblical covenant. We explain next.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Finally tonight, nearly 3 weeks after the mass shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville claimed 6 lives, the community is working to rebuild the physical space and support hurting families.
And in the midst of grief, a symbol of hope. A big, bright, bold rainbow arched over the school Thursday during the Christian school community's very first chapel since the fatal shooting back in March. Several members of the community went outside to admire the sight. Many saying the rainbow is a sign that God is with us in times of trouble, and that is certainly beautiful, and what a wonderful message to hold at such a difficult time as many people try to recover and heal from that horrible, horrible tragedy.
Beautiful, and you know, I think it's a reminder to all of us and to our country that God is near in times of trouble.
And always offers signs of hope.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.